Why do we call it a hot dog when it's not a dog? The weird story behind America's strangest food name. Have you ever stopped to think about the name hot dog? Because when you really think about it, the name makes absolutely no sense. It's hot, but it isn't always hot. And it's called a dog even though there's no dog in it. So why on earth do we call it a hot dog? The answer is stranger than you might expect, and the real story involves German immigrants, sausages, baseball games, cartoonists, and one famous story that may not even be true. To understand the mystery, we have to go back to 19th century America, long before hot dogs became one of the most recognizable foods in the world. During the 1800s, millions of German immigrants arrived in the United States, bringing their food traditions with them. Among those traditions were sausages. Germans had been making many different kinds of sausages for centuries, including sausages similar to what Americans would eventually call frankfurters and wieners. These sausages quickly became popular in American cities, especially because they were cheap, filling, and easy to cook. But there was a problem. Americans didn't initially call them hot dogs. They had much more ordinary names. You might hear them called frankfurters, wieners, dachshund sausages, or simply sausages. And that last nickname is where things start getting weird. Some German sausages were long, thin, and reddish-brown, and people joked that they looked like dachshunds, the small German dogs with long bodies and short legs. Because of this resemblance, the sausage was sometimes humorously compared to a dachshund sausage. Eventually, the dog joke became connected to the sausage itself. But how did dachshund sausage become hot dog? The answer may have something to do with baseball. By the late 19th and early 20th centuries, sausage vendors were selling hot sausages at sporting events, especially baseball games. They were served warm inside long bread rolls, making them easy for spectators to eat while watching the game. The combination was perfect: cheap, hot, portable, and filling. And somewhere along the way, people began calling the sausage a hot dog. But here's where the story gets really interesting. There is a famous legend about a cartoonist named Tad Dorgan. According to the story, Dorgan was watching a baseball game in New York when he saw vendors selling hot sausages. He supposedly couldn't spell the German word for dachshund, so he drew a cartoon of a dachshund inside a bun and wrote the words hot dog. It sounds perfect. There's just one problem. Historians haven't found the original cartoon. And that's a huge problem for the story. The legend has been repeated for generations, but there is no solid evidence proving that Tad Dorgan actually invented the term. In fact, newspapers had already used the phrase hot dog before the date traditionally associated with his cartoon. So if the cartoonist didn't invent the name, where did it come from? The truth is that nobody knows for certain. And that's actually more fascinating than the legend. The phrase hot dog appears in American newspapers in the late 1800s, where it was used in connection with sausages and sometimes as slang. By the early 1900s, the expression was becoming increasingly familiar. It seems that hot referred to the sausage being served hot, while dog came from the old joke comparing long sausages to dachshunds. In other words, nobody necessarily sat down and officially named the food hot dog. The name probably evolved naturally. A joke here. A nickname there. A vendor using it. A newspaper printing it. And eventually, everyone knew what it meant. But there's another strange detail. Why did Americans choose the word dog instead of simply calling it a hot sausage? Because food names are often influenced by humor. Think about it. A sausage that looks vaguely like a dachshund is funny. A hot sausage being sold in a long bun is visually similar to a long-bodied dog. The nickname was memorable. And once a strange name becomes popular, it can become almost impossible to replace. Imagine if Americans had called it a hot frankfurter sandwich instead. It doesn't have quite the same ring to it. Hey, let's get a hot dog. Simple, fast, memorable. And eventually, the name became much bigger than the original joke. The hot dog became part of American culture. It became associated with baseball stadiums, summer barbecues, street vendors, fairs, road trips, and the 4th of July. It became one of those foods that feels almost inseparable from American life. And here's the funniest part. The name survived even after most people forgot where it came from. Today, billions of hot dogs are eaten around the world. People put mustard on them. Ketchup, relish, onions, chili, cheese, sauerkraut. Some people even argue passionately about which toppings belong on a proper hot dog. But almost nobody asks the original question anymore. Why is it called a dog? And the answer is not that someone secretly put dog meat inside the bun. That's one of the myths that has followed the name for generations. The dog most likely came from a nickname for the sausage itself, a joke about its long, thin shape and its resemblance to a dachshund. So the next time you bite into a hot dog, remember what you're actually holding. Not a dog. Not a mysterious invention from one famous person, but a food created from centuries of European sausage making, brought to America by immigrants, transformed by street vendors and sporting culture, and given a ridiculous name that somehow became one of the most famous food words on earth. And perhaps that's why the name survived. Because hot sausage describes what it is. But hot dog tells a story. A strange little joke that somehow became history.